acting crazy. See if I can get this to cooperate with me today. Yeah, all right, I'm gonna go over. Okay.
It is our meeting.
It is our.
Remember that policy.
Your circus, Liz.
We're the clients.
The Wednesday, May 31st, 2023 regular meeting of the Gardner City Council Finance Committee will come to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
President Kaczynski.
Present.
Councilwoman Cormier.
Present.
Councilman
Present.
Is anyone here recording today's meeting? We begin with the first items on the agenda under section 1, item 11009, an order authorizing $300.09 payment of prior year expenditure for police salary expenditure. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President. This is for a police officer who received a college degree per the collective bargaining contract that we have with the patrol union. Their pay rate is dependent on the education that they have. This person received a bachelor's degree, so this would be going back to pay them the difference of what they were paid and if they were paid adjusting for their bachelor's degree in the last fiscal year.
So this is because a degree was not previously recognized.
Correct.
And now they're getting paid for that degree.
Yes.
This is a new officer, right? That's probably why I was a bit missed.
Yeah, he's been with us for a couple of years. We're fairly new. Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to recommend authorization.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Donalds to recommend authorization. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Item 11011, an order transferring $10,500 from Building Inspector Department head salaries to professional services expenditures. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President. In between the time that Acting Commissioner Jeff Cook left the city and current Commissioner Tom Zupa has been hired, we had an acting commissioner, Mr. Richard Hanks, fill the role just like we did with Mr. Cook. Since it is a contract, it's considered an expense, operating expense, thank you, John. An operating expense and not a salary line item. Therefore, in order to pay this, that money that he had reserved in the salary line item, and this is basically for lack of a better term, the compensation for his time he did with us as our acting building commissioner, but since it's done as a contract, we need to move the money out of a salary account into an expense account.
Thank you. Motion?
I move to recommend passes to the council.
Motion made by Councilor Donalds, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage to the council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Item 11012, an order transferring $5,000 from Human Resource Department head salaries to pool department professional services expenditure. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President, and Director Pond is here, who oversees the operations of the pool. Last year, the City Council voted to appropriate in the budget more money that was approved in the compensation schedule for the Human Resources Director. What we're looking at doing here is transferring that unused money in that difference out of that line item so that we can use it to hire a contractor to help in the opening of the pool. This is something that the late Mr. Don Lemieux used to help us with. So now that he's unfortunately no longer with us, and Mr. Rob Cormier, who used to work for the city, is very familiar with the pool as he used to work with that, hiring him on as a contractor this year to at least help us open up the pool with the new filtration system and get everything up and running for the season.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions, comments from the committee?
That makes sense. Make a motion that we recommend the transfer.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Donalds to recommend transfer. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Item 11014, an order transferring $307,000 from sewer surplus retained earnings to sewer department operating expenditures. The DPW is here.
Oh, boy, yeah, they have a...
Have a seat. Mayor Nicholson, if you'd like to begin, I'm not sure if any of you gentlemen would like to.
Absolutely, Madam President. This is with regard to the NEPA response for an environmental impact report to be done for the potential for the sludge landfill expansion. You'll see the letter here from Director Arnold. We're going into detail as to what this will be going for, what the process is. We have our DPW Director Dane Arnold, our DPW Business Manager Chris Coughlin, and our City Engineer Rob Oliver here to explain their involvement in the process as well, and they can talk a lot more in depth as to what's in front of you.
So we're required to not only go through Mass DEP, we're also required to go through MEPA, given the scope of the sludge landfill expansion. We submitted an application along with the plans. We got back a response from MEPA, which is going to require us to do an environmental impact report. And as part of that, we have to address, I believe there was like 30 comments, or 35 comments from individuals from local, as far as, I believe there was even some from Colorado that we have to respond. We can't just say, see section 10 of our submittal. We actually have to do an individual response to each question and concern. So as part of that, we got Woodard and Curran, who was our consultant that's working on this project. We got a proposal from them of $307,000 to do the report. We have to look into some alternatives, which I outlined in that. We have currently looked at two. And the largest chunk of that $307,000 is the individual response to the questions, concerns from people and committees and whatnot. So we have looked at two alternatives since. We also looked at alternatives when you originally did the wastewater upgrades back in 2014, I believe it was. So we're looking at Somax, which it's this company that more or less, I'm going to just say it cooks sludge and it generates energy if there's enough. If it can generate energy, it can put it into the grid. So we looked at this facility. There's one out in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. We looked at where we might be able to put it, maybe down behind the animal shelter possibly. But they analyzed our sludge. It doesn't generate enough energy on its own, so we'd have to truck in about 60% more trucking into the city along with food waste, and would be relying on other communities to buy into this and bring it into the city. So we would more or less be acting as a what's the word I'm looking for?
A sludge processing facility at that point, or food waste as well.
But we'd be handling the contracts with different municipalities, and we just thought that was kind of a large risk for the ratepayers, given that it's at least a $10 million capital cost to it. The second alternative we looked at was the anaerobic digester, which hasn't even started permitting, I don't believe, down in Fitchburg. We met with EQ, which they're working with Synagro and other companies to get this design and built anaerobic digester down in Fitchburg. They gave us a rough estimate of $170 a wet ton, which translate with our sludge, translates to over $1 million that it would cost just in tipping fees down in Fitchburg, and that's today as they off the cuff. So as states, and if you looked into this, as states like Maine and other Rhode Island and whatnot, they're coming more and more stringent with taking outside sludge from other communities. It's a huge issue that Mass has, trying to dispose of sludge. So if one of these, right now, Synagro is working with, I believe it's New York State, getting rid of their sludge. If all of a sudden New York State says, we're not taking outside sludge from Massachusetts, given the PFAS and whatnot, if they stop that, the tipping rates are going to get even higher down with this anaerobic digester. So given that, we looked at the sludge landfill. Still, at worst case, it lasts us 17 years if we build it. We got a rough estimate, I believe it was $6.4 million. So if you do the math, it's about $600,000 a year for the city to dispose by building the sludge landfill in town. We own it, we control it. There's no tipping fee other than the loan payback. So we still think this is our best alternative. Ultimately, it's the city's, it's the mayor and the council's decision on what we do with this. We would recommend still moving forward with the expansion of the sludge landfill. There's my very long-winded.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
I think Director Arnold summed it up pretty well. Yeah.
Thank you.
But
Questions,
these
comments?
these responses still need to be done.
Yes.
This is why we're talking this. One question, the anaerobic digester in Fitchburg, you said they hadn't even hit the permitting process yet?
I don't believe they've
Did
submitted.
they give you any idea? And I'm not trying to pin you down to the exact month, but how long they're looking at if everything went in?
They were hopeful for 2026 operation.
Okay, you understood what I was
Yeah,
trying to.
that was their plan. Of course, they'll have to go through many of the similar permitting processes that we've started back in
Right.
2017. So it's a rough estimate on when they think
Okay,
it's
that was
operational.
the figure I was looking for.
Yep.
And doing it locally, the timeline for getting that into operation, it actually would be just a continuation of what we're doing.
We have enough capacity to get us to 2026, 2027, but we're gonna need to start construction prior to that. So we're looking at construction, I think it was 2020, late 2025?
Yeah, maybe early 2025 at this point.
At this point, we're at the mercy of permitting.
Which it sounds like it's a long way away, it's a year and a half away.
Okay, and what's
Well,
the
regardless of which way we go, I guess we have to answer the questions that have been asked by a very large group of people. Also our own research. So I'll make a motion that we recommend, I guess it would be the transfer.
Motion made by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Donald to recommend the transfer to the full council. Is there a discussion on the motion?
Just to be clear, the response by Woodward and Kerr, this is gonna analyze the other alternatives as well? Correct.
Yes, it's the full environmental impact report, not just the comments.
Not
That's
just the 35 comments.
Yeah, that's just a significant portion of it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 11015. In order transferring $39,348 from sewer surplus retained earnings to DPW Department new equipment. Dave? Mary Nicholson?
This is a yearly transfer that we do for, Veolia operates our sludge landfill, and they would normally have to purchase sludge cover material from Graves or local contractors. Seems how we're not using the gravel bank, we are just using city gravel and trucking it, and they're using it as cover material. So we get an estimate, it's about $9 per yard. We cut it in half every year as far as the cost of it, kind of figuring it's a fair cost. So we estimated about $4.50 per yard. We used 8,700 yards approximately, and that's where we came up with the $39,348.
It's still the savings for the ratepayer. Yeah.
And if Veolia didn't pay that, they'd pass it on to us anyway. We'd end up paying for it. So it's a win-win, I think, for both sides.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the transfer.
Second.
Motion made by Councillor Donald, seconded by Councillor Cormier to recommend approval of the transfer to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Item 11016, a measure authorizing the mayor to execute the subordination for case number 11-293 for the purpose of the Community Development Housing Rehabilitation Program. Mayor Nicholson is Director of Beer Guard here.
Trevor.
Beer Guard, if you want to come up for this one.
This is something that we've done several times in the past, Madam President. This is we have a loan on a property that we did through a CDBG grant housing rehabilitation program. The owner, whenever they go to either sell or refinance the house, we have to subordinate our lien on the property against the main mortgage holder. So that's exactly what this property is here. Did I get that right as best I could? Thanks.
Anything further to add?
I don't.
Okay. Is there questions, comments from the committee?
No, this is a somewhat common.
I move to recommend passage of the measure to the full council.
Motion made by Councillor Donald, seconded by Councillor Cormier to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Section 2, referred to the Finance Committee. Item 10990, an order appropriating $14,925 from free cash to the IT Department City Hall copy machine account. Director O'Keefe is here from the IT Department. We did have some questions about this. This was previously on our agenda and was referred back to us. Do you have anything to add for us?
The existing copier we purchased 11 years ago. So an outright purchase 11 years ago got us 11 years of life of the fastest, largest copier in the building. This copier has copied or scanned or printed more than a million sheets in 11 years.
And I believe the questions that the council had the last time was the lease versus a purchase agreement. Reviewing those options with Director O'Keefe, who reviewed them himself, we found it to be cheaper to own on our own and just maintain as much as we could. But Bob, do you want to?
Yes, typical lease that is signed in the city by our school department is a 3 to 5 year lease. The end of that term, they have 3 choices. They could buy out the lease, which means at the end of the 3 to 5 years, they don't even own it. They could continue to pay the monthly fee and continue renting it at that point, or purchase a new one. And if you purchase a new one, at that point, you're actually getting rid of a working machine. So if we did something similar in the city with the 3 to 5 year lease, we would have lost 6 to 8 years of life of that copier, since we would have turned it in prematurely. Leasing is also a tax consideration for organizations that pay taxes.
Yes, that's right.
We don't pay taxes, so I don't see any of the benefits.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
The cost per print is significantly lower with the purchase over time than the...
Yes, the cost per print, the program we go with includes toner and service. And the cost per print for Xerox, the one quote that you've seen where we got the number 15,000, was 0.006 or 0.6 of a penny. We have since, because it's a large purchase, been getting competitive quotes. And we actually got that down through a competitor to 0.004.
Thank you. Further questions, comments on the committee?
I don't think so. So we do have a contract though for service and toners and all that?
Yes, in City Hall, every single copier and printer is covered by the same contract that covers service and toner.
Okay.
That was the concern from the council, was the lease versus the purchase. So I think we've answered our questions. Is there any further?
For a 3 to 5 year lease, so what would roughly that cost over the term? Do you have an idea?
The monthly cost, I wouldn't know, because I haven't even asked for a lease option, since lease would not work. There is also a consideration different here from the school department. The school department, they have throughout all their buildings 20 plus copiers, and they replace them all at the same time. So for a purchase for them, that would be a very large figure in a single year. So they use leasing to balance their budget. So they have a known expense each year, and they don't have, a large expense. And for them, with 20 copiers, it would be a $300,000 expense, not a $15,000 expense.
It's got to be, obviously these companies have a lease for a reason. They're making money, more money off of this option because it's a less upfront. So I would be inclined to, recommend approving this order to the full council.
Motion made by Councilor Dunlap, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage to the full council. Is there a discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Section 3, FY 2024 budget hearings. Okay, for the public watching, the purpose of the budget hearings is to give each city department the opportunity to present their budget to the city council standing committee that is associated with their department. The departments at today's meeting are associated with the finance committee. Thank you to the department heads and Mayor Nicholson for being here at today's meeting. The FY 2024 budget hearing of the Gardner City Council Finance Committee is now open, and we'll begin with Mayor Nicholson for an overview of the FY 2024 budget that you submitted.
Thank you, Madam President and councilors. The FY 2024 budget is pretty level service, level funded compared to the FY 23 budget. Basically what happened was back in late December, early January, we reached out to all the department heads with the form to fill out like they do an annual every year. And one of the things that I asked for some of the departments, or put out in the budget memo that was issued, was for two things. What does your department need to get by with operations if things were just to continue as they are right now? And then the second one was, what would be your wish list that if you could have the ideal situation in your department, what would that be? That way we could see where we could build up to if we are, you know, working on a long-term plan for the city's finances. So that's why, for example, even though it's not in front of this committee, it's one of the more obvious places to see it. If you look at the fire department, one of the things that Chief Lagoy put in was a deputy chief, an EMS coordinator, a floater position, those things there that are not included in the final budget, but they're things that he has said if the department wants to grow in an ideal situation, these are positions that we should look at in the long run. So that's just, again, an example of one that's there. So there are items like that that are included in the department request of the budget that were not included in the final budget, just so we could see where we should be long-term planning to go to in the future. The salaries for most non-union positions are a 2% cost of living adjustment. I say most because there are certain positions like our temporary laborers, our lifeguards, our certain other positions that are on the third page of the compensation schedule that were under the $15 an hour minimum wage that is now sent, so those had to be adjusted to meet current minimum wage requirements. Most other positions are all at a 2% cost of living adjustment, if not all. Other than that, I'm sure we can go into each of these with the different department heads and continue the conversation moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, if I also may, Madam President, one of the things I should say, when you look at the full department quest with the whole ideal situation list versus what we were able to afford within the limitations of Proposition 2.5 and our revenue projections, which we like to take 90% of the average of the previous 3 fiscal years in order to make sure that we're living within our means with the revenue that we're collecting. We had to cut about $7.5 million from department requests to what we were able to afford, but we're still able to continue the operations that we have with this budget that you have before you.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Okay. The department budget hearings will now begin. We'll go through each department as they're listed on our agenda. The first department listed is the City Council. Madam Clerk, would you like to speak on your budget?
No, but it's pretty much level funded from last year. The only difference is probably the salaries where one of the councils wasn't getting paid and now getting paid now that she's retired.
This also reflects the ordinance change.
I was just going to ask, it does reflect the ordinance change. Okay.
Questions, comments from the committee?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mayor and Mayor's Unclassified, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This does reflect the ordinance change as well. There's a 2% cost of living adjustment for the 2 non-union staff positions that I have. The intern line was flatlined from last year, so there is no adjustment to that one. And most of the other line items were level funded. You'll notice that professional service has a $73,000 balance versus the 14 that's in there now. That's because when the free cash appropriation was placed into that account for the grant writer that we had through CMRPC, that was put into that line item at the end of the fiscal year. That'll be encumbered into its own line item, but that's just where that money was appropriated. You'll see the actuals for 2022 are closer to that $14,000 mark there, so that's why there's such a big gap in that. And then the rest was the same. We do fund the mayor's portrait line item every odd numbered year. That way, if someone new is elected mayor, that is a line item that's funded there. If no one is elected mayor, that line item basically falls to free cash at the end of the year. But out of the scheme of an $83 million budget, $1,000 shouldn't be that much of a hit, and it's preparing ourselves for whatever the outcome of the election is.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
The telecommunications line, that one, I believe, is up and not used a bunch. From previous year.
Increased in, there's a lot that's gonna be hitting that line item.
This year, I didn't know if there's planning for that as well as for communications as well, both of those.
Yeah, I believe
seem
that.
underutilized some years, but then other years looks in the past, at least what we can see here, is being used, so I didn't know if there was expected expenses.
There are, yeah, I think it's pretty much almost used up now. This was printed on
Back in April.
30th.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Mayor's not classified?
Thank you, Madam President. This one is also pretty much the same as before. The termination leave reserve, you'll notice that the actuals have a zeroed out number. That's because throughout the course of the fiscal year, as employees leave, this is the line item that we pay their accrued time benefits and anything we owe them at either resignation or retirement out. But what we do is we transfer those into the other departments from this line item. It's just a place where we can put a placeholder for those. The Prospect Street School, Waterford Street School, Energy and Utilities line item is in this still. You'll notice we're at 70,000 actual for this year, but we're only looking for $50,000 in the budget. That's because of the upcoming sale of Prospect Street School. So we'll only have to worry about Waterford Street School at that point.
Was Waterford the bigger chunk of that, or just the increase in utility costs is kind of part of it too?
Just the utility costs. The new electrical rates are set to go in on November 1st, so we'll hopefully see that reflection then. The opioid professional services expense, that's the money that we received from the settlement that was done through the Attorney General's office against the opioid manufacturers and distributors. The building demolition account, in order to help the budget, I zeroed that out. So that's why that's not at what it used to be before. And the rest is pretty much the same as previous years.
The lawsuit one we leave blank.
Was that?
The lawsuit one we leave blank also.
Yeah, free cash, if we need it.
Yeah.
Questions, comments from the committee further?
For the opioid, it's money that's coming in, is there was talk about having that in a different account, right, at some point? Is that?
At some point, yes. We just
still waiting on the.
on guidance from the state, yeah.
And it has to go into the account, whatever the state says.
Correct.
We have to do with that, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Assessor? Christine Kumar is here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me go.
Do you want to speak on your budget?
Sure.
This represents the 2% cost of living adjustment for the department head position. The salary and wages of the board and commission salaries, those are set by the ordinance. That has not changed, so therefore there's a flat line there. And then, Chris, it's all you.
Everything else is pretty much no changes from the previous year. Cost of operating the department, you will see that the valuation update line item at the bottom is lower because now we're back into an interim year as opposed to a certification year, which is more costly. Other than that, not many changes.
The clerical staff is a union position as well, so that's governed by the union contract.
Questions, comments from the committee?
No, that was the one question I had on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Contributory retirement board is Cheryl or John, come on up.
So basically on that department, the board salaries are the same as previous. We did have an increase. No, it was just, we just increased that on previous year. Let's see what else. And I'm sorry, the salary for the administrator, actually that's contract. She has a 3-year contract, and it's this, and FY24 is her last year where her contract will be up in FY25. And then the retirement assessment amount that was approved previously.
That's something that's set through an actuarial firm that comes out and looks at all the books and our retirement pension liability throughout the course of the next several years. And then again, this is one of our few contractual employees that we have hired by the retirement board.
Questions, comments from the committee?
I none on this one.
So that temporary salary and wages, is that contractual
No, the temporary salary and wages, that's when we have,
If she needs help, we had one, she had an employee do all her scanning and all that. That's pretty much done, but we just keep that there as a placeholder for if she needs any help with payroll or anything like that. All these expenses actually get reimbursed from the retirement fund, so it's actually no cost to the city.
Yeah, this is not in the tax rate, it's.
yeah, it's not in the tax rate, it's in the payroll deductions.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Purchasing, Director Cormier?
So this represents a 2% cost of living adjustment for the department head. The senior account clerk position line item is a union employee, so that's governed by the union contract. We are looking at long-term plans for the department in the long run with the amount of work that's there. You'll notice that I might not have hit in this one. Yes, it did. The $2,669 in communications versus the $500 that was budgeted. That was mainly the sales of the properties that we had there. Some of that has been reclassified because we can use some of the proceeds from sales to reimburse those accounts in certain real estate cases if the property was not taken by tax title. But again, with the different advertisements that come up by law, there's certain things that have to be put out by that department that we're looking at, seeing how we can handle better in the future. And Josh, or Director Cormier can talk more about the operations of the department.
Yeah, we're basically a department that does a lot with a little, so you can see the budget doesn't have much to it. It's mostly the two people there. Yeah, as the mayor was saying, we did have a plan to take in all the advertisements. Right now, we place all the advertisements. The bill comes to us. We send it off to a department. So if DPW is doing something, we send it off to DPW, school, vice, so on. That does cause a little bit of a hiccup sometimes because we're at the mercy of them making payments. If they don't make the payments on time, account gets frozen. We can't place ads. So that was the idea. But now the departments will keep the same process. But we've attempted to become more efficient over the last couple of years with paperless contracts, paperless POs, things like that. So that was our next step. We'll try that again in the future. But other than that, everything else is basically what you see.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Civil enforcement?
Civil enforcement's the same thing. There's a mass journal law that governs the salary. The professional services you'll see is a lot less than it has been in the past. That's the payment for parking ticket processing. And obviously we've seen a reduction in that parking ticket processing over the last couple of years with combination of the pandemic and also the meter situation downtown. So.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you, it is.
Information technology? Hello again,
Nope.
Mr. O'Keefe. Would you like to speak about your budget?
Yes,
It represents a 2% cost of living adjustment for both non-union employees in this department. And then, Bob, you want to?
sure. The expenses also represent about 2%. The current fiscal year that was amended due to some transfers in needed for cybersecurity, current fiscal year is a total of $508,000, and the budget ask is $519,000. So it's about a 2% increase, most of that still being software licensing. Companies like Munis, they unfortunately add an automatic 5% each year. Some of the other companies don't increase because we're under a contract with them, but overall it's average 2%.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the committee?
The biggest single line item then is licenses and software.
Yes, Munis itself is approximately $95,000. Motorola radio contract is $60,000. So those two alone are the bulk of the software licensing.
Thank you. Further questions, comments from the committee?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Community development and planning? Good morning, Director Biergard.
This represents a 2% cost of living adjustment for the department head, the assistant director, the project manager and the economic development coordinator, the clerk assistant salary that's set by union contract. And a lot of these salaries are also funded through the CDBG grant, and that's allocated for in the compensation schedule rather than this document that you have here that makes up their full salary versus what's paid out of the tax dollars that we collect versus what's paid out of the CDBG grant. But Director Beauregard can go into more detail.
Thank you.
That pretty much sums it up. I don't really have anything else to add unless I have answer any questions.
Questions, comments from the committee?
No, I understand how they're shared salaries, which. No question.
It's pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, it's pretty well funded.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Human resources.
This represents a 2%.
Hello, Director Pond.
I'm sorry about that, Madam President.
That's all right.
Just on autopilot. This represents a 2% cost of living adjustment for the department head and the clerical staff, or these are non-union clerical staff that are in this office. You'll notice that the budget request is different or lower than what last year's was. That's because of the impending salary survey that we have going on to see what our non-union staff should be making in comparison to other communities of our caliber and size. That is currently ongoing. While I do believe that there are positions that all throughout the city that are underpaid, I'm hoping that salary survey does help us bring that back up. But that's why you'll notice a difference, at least in the ask for last year's budget versus what's put up this year, just a straight 2%. Director Pond?
I think, everything's pretty level funded. I think the only difference you might see is in the clerical salaries, only because one of my staff members is actually split with a couple of other departments. As usual, I always ask for more money for the medical exams because we just seem to be in a perpetual hiring mode.
You were here just 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago for a good chunk.
Yep.
Any questions, comments from the committee?
No?
No?
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we also have employee benefits next. You can say.
Most of these are either contractual or billed to us by the contractors that we have or who we work with. Deb, do you want to say anything about these? These are all pretty much set by outside companies for us that we get billed for.
Yeah, we try to keep the cost down. We go out every year. We've actually tried to find a different workers' comp provider. Unfortunately, for straight workers' comp, which doesn't include fire and police, it is a very, very small market. So we will continue each year to see if there's, other contracts we can look at from a comparative standpoint, but thus far, we've been unable to find anybody else that can provide us with a better situation than what we currently have with Mega.
You'll see there's line items broken out, city versus school. Those are reflected if you look at the school department budget and what they have listed as indirect costs. These are some of those indirect costs where they pay for the general fund to cover their share of our insurances that cover those employees.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
No? What's that with that one?
Thank you. Auditor? Hello, Auditor Richard. Would you like to speak on your budget?
Basically, salaries is a 2% level funding increase. The rest, there's a new item, telecommunications, that's basically paying for my cell phone coverage. I don't have a city cell phone, so I just get reimbursed for using mine. And then the other professional services went up. 60,000 of that is our annual audit fees, and then $8,250 is our actuarial fee. It's a full actuarial expense this year. Previous year, it was just a half actuarial cost. So every other year we have to do a full actuarial. And that's about it?
Both positions in this department are non-union, so that's why it's just straight 2% like the non-union employees.
Okay. Well, no further questions, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Treasurer collector, debt service and insurance. Good morning. Jen, would you like to speak on your budget?
Yes, it's, as the mayor's previously stated, the 2% cost of living increase. The assistant is also non-union, so that would be 2%. My staff are union, covered by union contract, and the only other increase is to professional services. We did send a lot of properties that were in tax title to land court this year, so we're anticipating some increased legal fees associated with moving those through land court.
The computer programmer operator salary and wages, you'll notice that that hasn't been funded for the last 2 years. That has been moved under the IT department. So that's why you'll notice back in 2022, the actuals under the IT side were much lower than they are now, and it's been zeroed out here in the treasurer's button is that the department is that has been shifted from one department to the other. That shouldn't show up in next year's actual report with how far we go back.
Next year doesn't disappear.
And then, as Treasurer Demick has said, I don't want the city to become the city's largest absentee landlord with properties that we've been taking in tax title, so that's why we've been a lot more aggressive in getting these properties back on the tax rolls, as we get them through the land court, getting them back up for sale for the council like we've done this past year. So that's one of the things that we'll be pushing again.
Thank you. Anything further?
Nope, not on that one.
Questions, comments from the committee?
With the parking meter clerk, obviously not fully utilized last year, is that something that was gonna?
The position was vacant for a while.
Position was vacant for a while,
So
okay,
now we've got someone who's in it.
gotcha, okay, thank you.
Anything further?
Nope.
Debt service?
We try to, it's based on what our loan payments are, with the biggest increase this coming year being the new school payment. It is considered outside debt because it was funded in part by MSBA, so it doesn't count towards our debt limit. But everything else is just governed by the payments that we do have to make.
How the Massachusetts School Building Authority works with taking out the payments for the school is we have to take everything out, and then they reimburse us for it. You have to take half out at one point and then another half out on the other. When we were required to take out the other half in the new school, interest rates were a lot higher, so that's why you look at almost the $1.5 million increase in the outside, exactly $1.5 million in the outside debt interest alone. That's just because of what interest rates were when we were legally obligated to take out the other half of the funding for the new school. So that's going to be a big increase that you see here, but that was just a matter of process that we were legally required to follow compared to what the Fed set interest rates at.
My understanding is they wouldn't, unless the construction was going, you couldn't take out the full loan. The construction had to be going or had to be completed. If it was half completed, that's how much you could take out. And so that's what it was at the time.
Correct,
If it had been full completed by the end of that year when the interest rate was the way it was, we would have. But that's just,
Right.
It was part of the plan.
The timing was actually good because we got the loan prior to the Fed increasing again, so it helped.
It just,
Rates
and
have
it
gone up.
for itself went away.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is something we potentially could look at refinancing in the future, but for now, this is what we're legally obligated to pay.
Thank you. Are there questions, comments from the committee? Insurance, thank you. Insurance?
Insurance is
property
just all of our property, public officials liability, and the vehicles. Standard increase, I think they go up 15 to 20% annually, but we do have opportunities for taking classes and courses to get a rebate on some of our insurances, and we are working on our motor vehicle fleet. Some of the values have decreased so much, we're moving them to a different schedule because the deductible is higher than the vehicle's worth. So we're seeing some changes in the cost of the motor vehicle. Hopefully that will I'd like to say it will come down, but we are in the process of replacing a lot of vehicles, so.
I mean, because we have some older vehicles, you know, it's hardly worth the collision part.
Correct,
I
right,
mean, it'd be like us owning an older car, and it comes a point where you
yeah.
cover yourself for liability and,
Yeah, and we're getting better working with the other departments, like DPW has a couple of vehicles they're just using for parts. So we've been able to remove them entirely from the insurance schedule because they're not roadworthy, they're not registered, so.
I appreciate the attention to that, because it's costly, and as I know it decreases, you know, you're paying for something that doesn't work.
because of the number of the vehicles in the fleet, it's easy
Yes.
to lose track of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot, that's for sure. Further
Who
questions,
goes for doing
comments?
that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Law department,
I'll be taking that one, Madam President. This is flatline from last year, aside from a 2% cost of living adjustment for both non-union employees and similar to the HR department. The budget request for the assistant salary is just a flat 2% pending, again, the compensation study that we have ongoing with the city.
thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Thank you. City clerk and elections, Madam Clerk?
Pretty much level funded. There'll be changes in the salary line items because the change of staff. We have, currently have 2 assistant clerks and then knock it down to 1 assistant, 1 admin, and a part-timer to help me during as a floater during election time, census, and job registrations during this busy time.
Basically, if you look at the $95,078 assistant clerk line that was there, and you add the assistant clerk to the clerk salary and wages, those equal that 95,078 number. It's just split out now if one person's doing 2 persons' duties that you currently have now.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, and then the old salary, the clerk salary and part-time clerk kind of combined for the new temp clerk
Yes.
amount as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was already in the budget from
Yeah.
current year.
Yep.
Okay, elections? Madam Clerk?
Pretty much level funded from previous years. I am anticipating more elections this year though because of the
Senatorial resignation that we just had.
The senatorial resignation, so that election will be, that'll be another special election, and do we have what's the timeline for that?
The Senate president can't set the date until the senator's resignation is on hand. Senator Goby has announced that she'll be giving that to the Senate president probably next Monday, because she starts June 6th with the Healy-Driscoll administration. At that point, the Senate president makes the recommendation for the Senate to vote to set that special election and special primary. If there is a primary, we don't know what that will be. But we won't know at least until mid-June what the date of those elections will be.
So we don't know if it's at any dates yet, and it could be tied into November for maybe.
Statutorily, the primary has to be within 75 days of the resignation being accepted by the Senate.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
Well, this is what it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Madam President, if I just may, on the city clerk thing too.
Sure.
If there is no change in the staffing levels, or if, things stay status quo and we have 2 assistant clerks versus whatever Clerk Serafin chooses to do, the appropriations voted for by the city council are salaries and wages. Salaries and wages and expenses, excuse me. So with that too, is there's some flexibility there. While it's broken out into 2 line items for reading purposes in this document, we can still continue to pay the current structure because that's all based on the compensation schedule that's there, rather than governed specifically by this. It's what we're by ordinance required to pay through the compensation schedule.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the committee regarding FY 2024 budget?
I have a question, Madam President. There are several sections of the budget that aren't included in the council rules, which is what we've normally sent to the standing committees.
Weights and measures.
Weights and measures is being one of them, the historical commission, several other ones that are there. So I have sent those off for I guess, educational purposes. These are luckily pretty flatlined from last year without any major changes, but in each standing committee that exists, there are several I'll call these sub-departments, if you will, that aren't listed in the council rules as under the purview of one committee over the other, therefore don't really get reviewed until the full committee, the whole hearing. So just wanted to throw that out there. That's why there's a couple extra departments at the end here, and there have been for each of the standing committees. It's just so those can at least get a look at. So those are for your own educational purposes.
I appreciate you including them. I was gonna ask you, so thank you. Does anyone have any questions on any of these?
No, then we have our state and county assessments that are always,
I assume the increase, that's the Massachusetts Regional Transportation Authority, and that assessment is due to fuel costs. And
Yes.
Yeah,
And that's set by the Commonwealth by formula.
yep, okay. That was what I
and
noticed.
then charter school and school choice, that's
Yes.
predetermined.
Yeah, who knows where.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the FY 2024 budget hearings are now closed. Thank you, department heads. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
I will, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Dunlap, seconded by Councilor Cormier. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.